Chapter 45 The Hadarac Desert. A vast expanse of dunes spread to the horizon like ripples on an ocean. Bursts of wind twirled the reddish-gold sand into the air. Scraggly trees grew on scattered patches of solid ground any farmer would have declared unfit for crops. Rising in the distance was a line of purple crags. The imposing desolation was barren of any animals except for a bird gliding on the zephyrs. "You're sure we'll find food for the horses out there?" queried Eragon, slurring his words. The hot, dry air stung his throat. "See those?" asked Murtagh, indicating the crags. "Grass grows around them. It's short and tough, but the horses will find it sufficient." "I hope you're right," said Eragon, squinting at the sun. "Before we continue, let's rest. My mind is slow as a snail, and I can barely move my legs." They untied the elf from Saphira, ate, then lay in the shadow of a dune for a nap. As Eragon settled into the sand, Saphira coiled up next to him and spread her wings over them. "This is a wondrous place," she said. "I could spend years here and not notice the passing time." Eragon closed his eyes. "It would be a nice place to fly," he agreed drowsily. "Not only that, I feel as though I was made for this desert. It has the space I need, mountains where I could roost, and camouflage prey that I could spend days hunting. And the warmth. Cold does not disturb me, but this heat makes me feel alive and full of energy." She craned her head toward the sky, stretching happily. "You like it that much?" mumbled Eragon. "Yes. Then when this is all done, perhaps we can return." He drifted into slumber even as he spoke. Saphira was pleased and hummed gently while he and Murtagh rested. It was the morning of the 4th day since leaving Gilead. They had already covered 35 leagues. They slept just long enough to clear their minds and rest the horses. No soldiers could be seen to the rear, but that did not lull them into slowing their pace. They knew that the Empire would keep searching until they were far beyond the King's reach. Eragon said, "Couriers must have carried news of my escape to Galbatorix. He would have alerted the Razak. They're sure to be on our trail by now. It'll take them a while to catch us even by flying, but we should be ready for them at all times. And this time they will find I am not so easily bound with chains," said Saphira. Murtagh scratched his chin. "I hope they won't be able to follow us past Bullridge. The rammer was an effective way to lose pursuers. There's a good chance our tracks won't be found again." "Something to hope for indeed," said Eragon as he checked the elf. Her condition was unchanged. She still did not react to his ministrations. "I place no faith in luck right now, though. The Razak could be on our trail even as we speak." At sunset, they arrived at the crags they had viewed from afar that morning. The imposing stone bluffs towered over them, casting thin shadows. The surrounding area was free of dunes for half a mile. Heat assailed Eragon like a physical blow as he dismounted Snowfire onto the baked, cracked ground. The back of his neck and his face was sunburnt, his skin was hot and feverish. After picketing the horses where they could nibble the sparse grass, Murtagh started a small fire. "How far do you think we went?" Eragon asked, releasing the elf from Saphira. "I don't know," snapped Murtagh. His skin was red, his eyes bloodshot. He picked up a pot and muttered a curse. "We don't have enough water and the horses have to drink." Eragon was just as irritated by the heat and dryness, but he held his temper in check. "Bring the horses." Saphira dug a hole for him with her claws, then he closed his eyes, releasing the spell. Though the ground was parched, there was enough moisture for the plants to live on, and enough for him to fill the hole several times over. Murtagh refilled the water skins as water pooled into the hole, then stood aside and let the horses drink. The thirsty animals quaffed gallons. Eragon was forced to draw the liquid from even deeper in the earth to satisfy their desire. It taxed his strength to the limit. When the horses were finally sated, he said to Saphira, "If you need a drink, take it now." Her head snaked around him and she took 2 long draughts, but not more. Before letting the water flow back into the ground, Eragon gulped down as much as he could, then watched the last drops melt back into the dirt. Holding the water on the surface was harder than he expected. But at least it's within my abilities, he reflected, remembering with some amusement how he had once struggled to lift even a pebble. It was freezing when they rose the next day. The sand had a pink hue in the morning light, and the sky was hazy, concealing the horizon. Murtagh's mood had not improved with sleep, and Eragon found his own rapidly deteriorating. During breakfast, he asked, "Do you think it'll be long before we leave the desert?" Murtagh glowered. "We're only crossing a small section of it, so I can't imagine it'll take us more than 2 or 3 days." "But look how far we've already come." "Alright, maybe it won't. All I care about right now is getting out of the Hadarac as quickly as possible. What we're doing is hard enough without having to pick sand from our eyes every few minutes." They finished eating, then Eragon went to the elf. She lay as one dead, a corpse, except for her measured breathing. "Where lies your injury?" whispered Eragon, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "How can you sleep like this and yet live?" The image of her, alert and poised in the prison cell, was still vivid in his mind. Troubled, he prepared the elf for travel, then saddled and mounted Snowfire. As they left the camp, a line of dark smudges became visible on the horizon, indistinct in the hazy air. Murtagh thought they were distant hills. Eragon was not convinced, but he could make out no details. The elf's plight filled his thoughts. He was sure that something had to be done to help her or she would die, though he knew not what that might be. Saphira was just as concerned. They talked about it for hours, but neither of them knew enough about healing to solve the problem confronting them. At midday they stopped for a brief rest. When they resumed their journey, Eragon noticed that the haze had thinned since morning, and the distant smudges had gained definition. No longer were they indistinct purple-blue lumps, but rather broad, forest-covered mounds with clear outlines. The air above them was pale white, bleached of its usual hue. All colour seemed to have been leached out of a horizontal band of sky that lay on top of the hills and extended to the horizon's edges. He stared, puzzled, but the more he tried to make sense of it, the more confused he became. He blinked and shook his head, thinking that it must be some illusion of the desert air. Yet when he opened his eyes, the annoying incongruity was still there. Indeed, the whiteness blanketed half the sky before them. Sure that something was terribly wrong, he started to point this out to Murtagh and Saphira when he suddenly understood what he was seeing. What they had taken to be hills were actually the bases of gigantic mountains, scores of miles wide. Except for the dense forests along their lower regions, the mountains were entirely covered with snow and ice. It was this that had deceived Eragon into thinking the sky white. He craned back his neck, searching for the peaks, but they were not visible. The mountains stretched up into the sky until they faded from sight. Narrow, jagged valleys with ridges that nearly touched split the mountains like deep gorges. It was like a ragged, toothy wall linking Allegatia with the heavens. "There's no end to them," he thought, awestruck. Stories that mentioned the Boar Mountains always noted their size, but he had discounted such reports as fanciful embellishments. Now, however, he was forced to acknowledge their authenticity. Sensing his wonder and surprise, Saphira followed his gaze with her own. Within a few seconds she recognized the mountains for what they were. "I feel like a hatchling again. Compared to them, even I feel small." "We must be near the edge of the desert," said Eragon. "It's only taken 2 days and we can already see the far side and beyond." Saphira spiraled above the dunes. "Yes, but considering the size of those peaks, they should still be 50 leagues from here. It's hard to gauge distances against something so immense. Wouldn't they be a perfect hiding place for the elves or the Varden?" "You could hide more than the elves and Varden," he stated. "Entire nations could exist in secret here, hidden from the Empire. Imagine living with those behemoths looming over you." He guided Snowfire to Murtagh and pointed, grinning. "What?" grunted Murtagh, scanning the land. "Look closely," urged Eragon. Murtagh peered closely at the horizon. He shrugged. "What? I don't—" The words died in his mouth and gave way to a slack-jawed wonder. Murtagh shook his head, muttering, "That's impossible." He squinted so hard that the corners of his eyes crinkled. He shook his head again. "I knew the Boar Mountains were large, but not that monstrous size." "Let's hope the animals that live there aren't in proportion to the mountains," said Eragon lightly. Murtagh smiled. "It will be good to find some shade and spend a few weeks in leisure. I've had enough of this forced march." "I'm tired too," admitted Eragon, "but I don't want to stop until the elf is cured. Or she dies." "I don't see how continuing to travel will help her," said Murtagh gravely. "A bed will do her more good than hanging underneath Saphira all day." Eragon shrugged. "Maybe. When we reach the mountains, I could take her to Surda. It's not that far. There must be a healer there who can help her. We certainly can't." Murtagh shaded his eyes with his hand and stared at the mountains. "We can talk about that later. For now, our goal is to reach the Boars. There, at least, the Razak will have trouble finding us, and we will be safe from the Empire." As the day wore on, the Boar Mountains seemed to get no closer, though the landscape changed dramatically. The sand slowly transformed from loose grains of reddish hue to hard-packed, dusky cream dirt. In place of dunes were ragged patches of plants and deep furrows in the ground where flooding had occurred. A cool breeze wafted through the air, bringing welcome refreshment. The horses sensed the change of climate and hurried forward eagerly. When evening subdued the sun, the mountain's foothills were a mere league away. Herds of gazelles bounded through the lush fields of waving grass. Eragon caught Saphira eyeing them hungrily. They camped by a stream, relieved to be out of the punishing Hadarac desert.